Este puțin probabil ca Putin să folosească armele nucleare în Ucraina, deoarece costul unei astfel de operațiuni ar depăși în mod clar orice beneficiu militar pe care Rusia l-ar putea obține. Opinia îi aparține lui Ian Brzezinski, expert american în securitate națională și politică externă. Într-un interviu acordat în exclusivitate pentru Euronews România, acesta a vorbit și despre situația de pe frontul ucrainean, dar și despre șansele președintelui României, Klaus Iohannis, de a ajunge la șefia NATO.
Thank you, Mr. Brzezinski. A lot has happened on the Eastern Front. Ukraine fights to maintain the front line, but Russia advances step by step. What is the fate of the war?
Thank you for having me on today. I'd say the fate of the war rests on two factors. The first is the courage, tenacity, and determination of the Ukrainian people, and that's unquestioned. The second factor is the will of the transatlantic community. When you look at the balance of power between NATO and the European Union on one side and Russia on the other, the West has a clearly dominant position. I mean, think about it. NATO has a GDP of about $52 trillion. That's just NATO nations alone. Russia has a GDP of about $1.8 to $2 trillion. So NATO is about 25 times the size of Russia in terms of GDP. NATO defense spending is $1.3 trillion this year. That's to Russia's $100 million. So that's more than 10 to 1 advantage that the alliance has. And then, of course, NATO military forces, without question, are better equipped, they're better trained, and they have much higher morale. They're more effective. So enabling Ukraine to win is not a matter of Western or transatlantic capability. It's a matter of political will. And that will be the defining issue at the upcoming NATO summit. Does the alliance have the will to enable its capacities to ensure Ukraine's victory?
The U.S. has announced it would deliver Patriot rockets to Ukraine. Also, Romania studies this possibility. Ukrainian pilots continue to train on F-16 jets currently in Romania. What would be the impact of these new weapons and these airplanes on the battle? Could this change the course of the war?
Well, first, let me just say it is a really great thing, and we should be highly appreciative of the assistance that Romania has been providing to Ukraine, and their training of Ukrainian pilots is another example of that. But no weapon is going to alone magically enable the Ukrainians to defeat Putin. F-16s, Patriots, and other systems have to be part of a comprehensive effort that includes the following elements. I would say one is unambiguous and determined endorsement of Ukraine's war objectives, total territorial reconstitution. Anything short of that is disillusioning to Ukrainians, and anything short of that basically is emboldening to Putin. Second, there has to be a surge in the supply of weapons across the board to Ukraine. All the weapons that Ukraine requires on the battlefield, ammunition, including artillery ammunition, UAVs, tanks, armored personnel carriers, mine-clearing equipment, long-range strike, and with that, the removal of restrictions that prevent Ukraine from using these weapons against legitimate targets in Russian territory. Third, there has to be real economic sanctions against Russia to really squeeze the war economy that Putin is generating over there. The fact that Russia's economy grew by some 3% last year shows that it shows the inadequacy of the Western sanction regime on Russia. Fourth, there's got to be a real communications campaign to turn the Russian people against the invasion, if not Putin. And then finally, and fifth, and I think this is pretty important, NATO membership for Ukraine has to be part of the win strategy. You know, extending NATO membership to Ukraine is the most effective way to convince Putin that Ukraine is not available for his hegemony. So that has to be part of the strategy. Those five key elements are what is necessary for the West to undertake with determination to enable Ukraine to win this war on its terms and win this war quickly.
The Russian President, Vladimir Putin, ordered nuclear military drills. Does he prepare to use them in Ukraine?
Well, nuclear coercion has been a prominent element of Putin's invasion strategy of Ukraine from day one. Sadly, the West has rewarded that coercion. And you know the list, Adriana. It's no boots on the ground, no NATO role in the war, the withholding of weapons that could have enabled Ukraine greater success in the early months of the war, and the list goes on. My fear is that when you reward nuclear coercion, you beget more nuclear coercion, and that has been the case. So this is the latest iteration of Putin's threats, a threat that was probably issued in response to Macron's statements that, nothing should be taken off the table when it comes down to allied forces in Ukraine. I think it's still very unlikely that Putin will use nuclear weapons because the costs of such an exercise would clearly outweigh any kind of military benefit he would attain. But I do fear that the more we reward nuclear coercion, the more we reward Putin's exercise of nuclear coercion, as time goes on, we do increase the likelihood of nuclear first use.
Romania has helped Ukraine in many ways from the first day of the war. Our country will host the biggest NATO base in Europe, and the president of Romania has received the award for leadership from the Atlantic Council, the think tank you're representing. What are his chances of becoming the Secretary General of NATO?
Well, it was a real honor last night for the Atlantic Council to host your president and to give him that award. I unfortunately wasn't able to be there, but I'm an enthusiastic endorser of that award. He has done a lot for Romania. He's done a lot for the alliance. And of course, Romania has done a lot to help Ukraine. Romania is spending 2.5% on defense. That is part of Iohannis's policies. Just personally speaking, I've seen Romanian troops back in when they were in Afghanistan, and it was so impressive. Iohannis would be a great NATO Secretary General, but right now, Prime Minister Rutte of the Netherlands has the lead. But as you know, the game isn't over until it's over.